So it's just a story about a simple parallel park, but at the same time, it's the story really of a man who executed that parallel park, and that's my grandfather. And the thing about my grandfather, a little bit of a backstory, is he was an immigrant coming into this country. He worked extremely hard to get everything. He ultimately got. He was a builder. He was a creator. He did some fantastic things. He was part of building Cole's bookstore and a bunch of different buildings around the city. But you get to a point where you kind of turn old and you have all this money and all these things and you're retired and you have nothing to do anymore and you have all these grandchildren and you kind of go through a bit of an identity crisis where you have to figure out, what's my worth? What am I doing here anymore? What's my value? How can I feel good about myself, my self-esteem? I'm sure athletes go through it all the time. And with him, it became driving. His self-esteem, his value, how he saw himself was all measured by how good of a driver he was. And compared to his friends, he was one of the best drivers out of all of them. So as he starts realizing that driving is important to him, he starts doing things a little bit differently, how he evaluates people on the road. If someone is on their phone when they're driving, like that person should be executed, all these sort of things. If someone's going 10 miles under the speed limit, like if he knew that person, he would kick him out of his home. Like how you are as a person is pretty much determined by how you drive. It's sort of measured. It was equal in his mind. So we all realize this and it's fine. But the question is, as a grandfather and him liking to drive, where does he go all the time? So the thing is, the one place he would always go, and this is going to be news to a lot of people, but this is where a lot of old people go during the day when there's nothing to do. They go to court. They watch people in court. They're not so satisfied with daytime television, so that's what they do. They just go to court. So he would go to court with this one guy all the time, his one court buddy, and his name was Spitzberg. Now, a little bit about Spitzberg, just a bit of background on Spitzberg, is that he was extremely, extremely racist. Now, my grandfather is kind of racist, but Spitzberg's way more racist than him. So when they're together, he sort of influences them. So it's sort of, the way to put it is sort of like if you're when you're in high school, you maybe one of those people who did drugs a little bit, but you were with someone who did drugs a lot, and your parents were like, don't hang out with that guy. That's how my grandmother felt about Spitzberg. He made my grandfather more racist, pretty much, when they'd hang out. So they'd hang out, they'd go to court all the time. And then one time, there was this one case, and it was close to sentencing, and they were really excited about it. I don't know, some drunk driver killed a cat, something really weird. I don't know what it was, to be honest. So they were going to sentencing, and my grandfather was going in to do parallel park, and he takes pride in his driving. But the thing is, they usually like to be 40 minutes early. This time, they're only 25 minutes early. And Spitzberg is already in his ear, are you going to make this, blah, blah, blah. And he's in his ear, he's getting in his head, apparently. And my grandfather butchers the entire parallel park. He butchers it. He ends up ramming into the back of the one of the reverses into the car, one of the cars. Big disaster. They missed the sentencing, and it was a Portuguese woman, and Spitzberg's going off on a racist rant. It got really bad, apparently. And we call this in our family. We'd always joke about it. We call it the Spitzberg incident. So what was really interesting is after that moment, my grandfather all of a sudden became obsessed with parallel parking. That was now the measure of a good driver. When I went on a date with a girl, he'd ask how was the parallel park? Ridiculous things you don't think, but then I'm thinking about it, it wasn't a great parallel park. And he's that's probably why it didn't go anywhere. And I was thinking maybe the old man's onto something. Anyway, so the parallel park became an obsession, even to the point where if you could do one of those front ends, he wouldn't do it. He's only doing the serious parallel parking. He's amazing at it. Flash forward 3 years, we're in Florida, and I'm telling this story because I was fortunate enough to be here, and I thank whoever every single day. I don't really believe in God, but I'm just happy to witness this. So it was a day my parents were golfing. We're in Florida. My grandfather's what are you doing right now? And he's I don't know. He's you want to go to court with me in Pittsburgh? I'm damn right I do. This is going to be incredible. So we go to court. Obviously, we're 50 minutes early this time because after the parallel park incident, we're not going to be late for court. So we're there and we're sitting on a bench. And actually, at the time, my grandfather was great. Like, he'd entertain me, and I just like pitch him crazy movie ideas. So telling him a movie idea I think he's actually going to really like, which is called Killing Salman Rushdie. And it's about these two Jewish guys who realize that there's a fatwa on Salman Rushdie's head, and they're just broke, so they want to like kidnap him and kill him and get the money from the Iranians, but the Iranians won't pay him because they're Jewish. Anyway, so I think my grandfather's going to fucking love this. And like, I'm really excited to tell him that. I didn't really want to go to like court. I want to tell him this idea. But as I'm like trying to tell him this idea, his attention is elsewhere. He's like focused in the distance. So I like kind of see his eyes, and what I see is there's just these two African American women, and they're having trouble paralleling parking, and they're really having a lot of trouble with it. And I'm like, holy shit, something's gonna happen here. I'm like, Spitzberg's making some racist comments. I'm like, what's my grandfather gonna do? He slowly gets up. I'm like, holy shit, is he gonna berate these women? Like, is there gonna be a fight between my grandfather and these two African American women? And like, my heart is racing. But then I look in his eyes and I realize he's replaying the Spitzberg incident, I think. Like a Vietnam vet who like was in war and battle. Like, that's what I think he's replaying. So he slowly walks over there, and I realize like they're talking, and he's trying to help them through it. And then finally, they just sort of motion for him to get in the car and do it. And he's like, he gives this nod, and he gets into their car. And I'm like, I realized there, like, this is the Spitzberg. This is going to be like the most masterful park I've ever seen. Like, I felt this was the moment you just sense. So all of a sudden he reverses, he pulls out, and it's a tight spot. These women were having a lot of trouble doing it. And in one like beautiful motion, it was honestly like art, science, whatever you want to call it, he pulls in, perfect parallel park, Spitzberg stunned. Honestly, so he gets out, the women are hugging him. It's like if the Israel-Arab conflict, like maybe it could be solved by one parallel park, because like these two different worlds are coming together, they're hugging him, everything is amazing. Spitzberg doesn't even seem racist anymore. It's like a great moment. And then finally, the woman sees, like she goes to her car, for some, I guess, I don't know, she had something in there. She goes to open the door, and it's locked. And we realize right there my grandfather had locked the keys in the car. She starts screaming, Eddie, we gotta fucking call Eddie, blah, 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 blah. Everything gets a little chaotic. Me and my grandfather Spitzberg, we just go into the court case and like pretend it didn't happen. And after that moment, like it was really interesting. My grandfather's like obsession for driving sort of curbed. Now he's into solitaire. And like I actually wish he would have been here tonight. And like I begged him to come, and he was close to coming, but he has a new rule, which is that he doesn't drive past Eglinton. So he refused to come. And that's it. But that's the story of my grandfather, the man in the Pellet Park.